Good morning, Bryn. I am here with a special guest for the last chapter of The Borrowers. Hopefully she can sit still and not be a bother. Chapter 20. But, exclaimed Kate, didn't he see them come out? No. Mrs. Driver came along, in a flurry of annoyance, because they were late for the train. She bustled him into the cab because she wanted to get back again, she said, as fast as she could, to be in at the death. Driver was like that. Katie was silent for a moment, looking down. So that is the end, she said at last. Yes, said Mrs. May. It could be, or the beginning. But, Kate raised a worried face. Perhaps they didn't escape through the grating. Oh, they escaped all right, said Mrs. May lightly. But how do you know? I just know. But how did they get across those fields with the cows and things, and the crows? They walked, I suppose. The Hendrys did. People can do anything when they have a mind set to. But poor Homily, she'd be so upset. Yes, she was upset, said Mrs. May. And how would they know the way? By the gas pipe, said Mrs. May. There's a kind of ridge all along, through the spiny and across through the spinney, maybe? Spinney. And across the fields. You see, when men dig a trench and put a pipe in it, all the earth they've dug out doesn't quite fit when they've put it back. The ground looks different. Poor Homily, she didn't have her tea or her furniture or her carpets or anything. Do you suppose they took anything? Oh, people always grab something, said Mrs. May, shortly. The oddest things sometimes, if you've read about shipwrecks. She spoke hurriedly, as though she were tired of the subject. Do be careful, child. Not grey next to pink. You'll have to unpick it. But, went on Kate in a despairing voice as she picked up the scissors, Homily would hate to have arrived there all poor and destitute in front of Loopy. Destitute? Said Miss May impatiently. And Loopy wasn't there, remember? Loopy never came back. And you know what Homily would do? Can't you see her? She'd be in her element. She would tie on her apron at once, and cry, these poor silly men. And she'd bustle and fuss and cook and clean, and make them wipe their feet when they come in. On what? Asked Kate. On a piece of moss, of course, laid down at the door. Were they all boys? Kate asked after a moment. Yes, harpsichords and clocks, and they'd spoil Arrietty dreadfully. What did they eat? Did they eat caterpillars, do you think? I hope she doesn't turn it off accidentally. And we're back. Pippi is still on my keyboard, but I unplugged it. Oh, goodness, child, of course they did. They had a wonderful life, all that Arrietty ever dreamed of. They could live very well. Badger's sets are almost like villages, full of passages and chambers and storehouses. They could gather hazelnuts and beechnuts and chestnuts. They could gather corn, which they could store and grind into flour just as humans do it. It was all there for them. They didn't even have to plant it. They had honey. They could make elderflower tea and lime tea. They had hips and haws and blackberries and sloes. Ooh, a sloe. Sloes. And wild strawberries. The boys could fish in the stream, and a minnow to them would be as big as a mackerel is to you. They had birds' eggs, any amount of them, for custards and cakes and omelettes. You see, they would know where to look for things. And they had greens and salads, of course. Think of a salad made with those tender shoots of young hawthorn. bread and cheese, as we used to call it, with sorrel and dandelion and a sprinkle of thyme and wild garlic. Homily was a good cook, remember. It wasn't for nothing that the clocks lived under the kitchen. I wonder what they're going to cook on. I'll have to make some sort of fireplace. Ventilation, perhaps. "But the danger!" cried Kate. "The weasels and the crows and the stoats, all those things." "Yes," agreed Mrs. May. "Of course there was danger. There's danger everywhere, but no more for them than for many human beings. At least they didn't have wars. And what about the early settlers in America, and those people who farm in the middle of the big game country in Africa, and on the edge of the jungles in India? They get to know the habits of the animals. Few animals kill for the sake of killing. Even rabbits know when a fox isn't hunting. They will run quite near him when he's full fed and lazing in the sun. These were boys, remember. They would learn to hunt for the pot and how to protect themselves. I don't suppose Arrietty and Homily would wander far afield." "Arrietty would," said Kate. "Yes," agreed Mrs. May, laughing. "I suppose Arrietty might." "So they'd have meat," said Kate. "Yes, sometimes. But borrowers are borrowers, not killers, I think," said Mrs. May. "That if a stoat, say, killed a partridge, they might borrow a leg. And if a fox killed a rabbit, they'd use the fur? Yes, for rugs and things." "Supposing," said Kate, "when they had a little roast, they skinned haws and baked them, would they taste like browned potatoes?" "Perhaps," said Mrs. May. "But they couldn't cook in the badger set. I suppose they would cook out of doors. How would they keep warm in the winter?" "Do you know what I think?" said Mrs. May. She laid down her work and leaned forward a little. "I think that they didn't live in the badger's set at all. I think they used it, with all its passages and storerooms, as a great honeycomb of an entrance hall. None but they would know the secret way through the tunnels, which led at last to their home. Borrowers love passages, and they love gates, and they love to live a long way from their own front door." "Where would they live, then?" "I was wondering," said Mrs. May, "about the gas pipe." "Oh, yes," cried Kate. "I see what you mean. The soil is all soft and sandy up there. I think they'd go right through the badger set and dig out a circular chamber, level with the gas pipe. And off this chamber, all around it, there'd be little rooms, like cabins. I think, said Mrs. May, that they'd bore 3 little pinholes in the gas pipe. One would be so tiny you could hardly see it, and that one would always be a light. The other 2 would have stoppers in them, which, when they wanted to light the gas, they would pull out. They would light the bigger ones from the small burner. That's where they'd cook, and what would give them light. But would they be so clever? But they are clever, Mrs. May assured her. Very clever. Much too clever to live near a gas pipe and not use it. They are borrowers, remember? But they'd want a little air hole. Oh, said Mrs. May quickly, they'd have one. How do you know? Asked Kate. Because once when I was up there I smelled hot pot. Oh, cried Kate excitedly. She twisted around and knelt up on the hassock. So you did go up there. So that's how you know. You saw them too. No, said Mrs. May, drawing back a little in her chair. I never saw them. Never. But you went up there. You know something. I can see you know. Yes, I went up there. Mrs. May stared back into Kate's eager face. Hesitant, she seemed. Almost a little guilty. Well, she conceded at last, I'll tell you. For what it's worth. When I went to stay at that house, It was just before Aunt Sophie went into the nursing home. I knew the place was going to be sold, so Again, Mrs. May hesitated, almost shyly. Well, I took all the furniture out of the doll's house and put it in a pillowcase and took it up there. I bought things, too, out of my pocket money. Tea and coffee beans and salt and pepper and cloves and a great packet of lump sugar. And I took a whole lot of little pieces of silk, which were over from making a patchwork quilt. And I took them some fish bones for needles. I took the tiny thimble I had gotten in a Christmas pudding, and a whole collection of scraps and cracker things I'd had in a chocolate box. But you never saw them. No, I never saw them. I sat for hours against the bank below the hawthorn ledge. It was a lovely bank, twisted and twined hawthorn roots and riddled with sandy holes, and there were wood violets and primroses and early campion, Campion. From the top of the bank, you could see for miles across the fields. You could see the woods and the valleys and the twisted lanes. You could see the chimneys of the house. Perhaps it was the wrong place. I do not think so. Sitting there in the grass, half dreaming and watching beetles and ants, I found an oak apple. It was smooth and polished and dry, and there was a hole bored into one side of it, and a slice off the top. "A teapot!" exclaimed Kate. "I think so. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find the quill spot. I called them down all the holes as my brother had done, but no one answered. Next day, when I went up there, the pillowcase had gone. And everything in it? Yes, everything. I searched the ground for yards around, in case there might be a scrap of silk or a coffee bean, but there was nothing. Of course, somebody passing might have just picked it up and carried it away. That was the day," said Mrs. May, smiling. "Oh, and carried it away." "That was the day," said Mrs. May, smiling, "that I smelled hot pot." "And which was the day," she asked, "that you found Ariette's diary?" Mrs. May laid down her work. "Kate," she began in a startled voice, and then uncertainly she smiled. "What makes you say that?" Her cheeks had become quite pink. "I guessed," said Kate. "I knew there was something you wouldn't tell me, like reading somebody else's diary." "It wasn't the diary," said Mrs. May hastily, but her cheeks had become even pinker. "It was the book called Memoranda, the book with blank pages. That's where she had written it. And it wasn't on the day I found it, but 3 weeks later, the day before I left." Kate sat silent, staring at Mrs. May. After a while, she drew a long breath. "Then that proves it," she says finally. "Underground chamber and all." "Not quite," said Mrs. May. "Why not?" asked Kate. "Ariette used to make her E's like little half-moons with a stroke in the middle." "Well?" said Kate. Mrs. May laughed and took up her work again. "My brother did too." And that is the end of The Borrowers. If we want to read more borrowers, the next one is called The Borrowers Afield, and here's the synopsis. Driven out of their house by a rat catcher, the clocks find themselves lost and alone in a frightening new world, the outdoors. Crows, moths, mice, even cold are life-threatening dangers to the tiny borrowers. But they must brave it all to find a new home. And then after that, we have the borrowers afloat. Do you remember in the Borrowers movie how Arrietty meets a young man named Spiller? Well, in the Borrowers Afloat, we meet Spiller. Oh, hi, Pippi. Are you done sitting on the keyboard? Thanks for listening, Bryn. I love you very much. Bye.